Former state senator for District 12. I served in the previous session, and that was the west side of Nashua going out to Mason. And I want to welcome you here. I'm from Hollis, by the way.
You need to run again.
Yes!
Yeah! We miss you, Jim! So anyway, we're here for a very exciting thing. I just want to tell you who I am. Some of you may not know. I did serve in the state senate. And I'm also a business owner, and also I ran a radio show here in Nashua where we did politics and personal finance, and actually we did some pretty good issues. For instance, we covered Benghazi a year ago, January. This would be January 2013, and we actually had a story out about the stand-down orders coming out of the strategy room, the White House strategy room, back then, okay? Which the White House still disavows and all that. So anyway, some of you are probably wondering why I am here and not somewhere else. As some of you may know, I was standing with my friend, Senator Gary Lambert. But I have, let's be gracious now, okay? He's a good guy, he's a good friend. I served with him in the state senate, and he served honorably in the Marines. Okay. So, but I have changed my position for two very brief reasons. One is we can't have the level of negativity in this primary. And you see the comments all over the place. This is the weirdest primary. This is not a good primary. It's very distracting. We need to get to the general election. And that soured me. The second reason is the debate this week on WMUR. I watched Marilinda. I wasn't there live, but we watched, actually we DVR'd it. I watched Marilinda, and I saw, here's a woman who grasps the issues. We have tough issues in this country, if you haven't looked around, and they're getting worse by the week. We basically have a White House that is totally out of touch with domestic and foreign policies. There's no leadership at all. And we have a drone in the 2nd district. Custer's last stand, right? Yeah. Yeah. So it's pretty clear to me who needs to get into that seat.
Yes.
So that's, yeah. By the way, let's welcome the trackers. They're really nervous about it. Well, I did get an email from Custer, by the way, and she's raising all this money because she said, hey, we can't slip in the polls anymore. I got this from her yesterday, okay? So they're very nervous over there. So it's my privilege to welcome a good guy, a really good guy, who is here to remind us of what is at stake. This is a very critical election, critical year in this 2nd district. We need to get Marilinda Garcia across the finish line the day after tomorrow. And we all need to take part in that, because get out the vote, as you know, in the primaries are always so critical. So I want to welcome a great guy who has come to get us excited, get us fired up to support Marilinda, and let's give a very warm New Hampshire welcome to Senator Ted Cruz.
Wow. God bless the state of New Hampshire. We are met here today because we are standing to fight to save our nation.
You ain't kidding.
Yes. Yes.
Against the Democrats.
I want to say to each and every one of you who is here today, thank you. Thank you for your passion for our nation. Thank you for your passion for our children and our grandchildren. You know, I look at the folks who have joined us up here. My wife Heidi and I, we've got two little girls at home, Caroline and Catherine. They're 3 and 6. Back at the Republican convention in Tampa in 2012, I spoke about the girls. I spoke about our national debt. And that evening afterwards, I went back to the hotel. It was about 1:30 in the morning. And I pulled out my iPhone and began looking at Twitter, which I do far too much. and it so happened that Paula Poundstone, the comedian, was watching the convention that evening. I guess she had nothing better to do. And she sent a tweet. She said, Ted Cruz just said, when his daughter was born, the national debt was $10 trillion. Now it's $16 trillion. What the heck did she do? Heidi and I laughed so hard we almost fell out of bed. But our daughter Caroline is 6. Any of y'all 6? How old are you? You're 8? How old are you? 8? 5.
I'm 4.
When's your birthday? March 18th. All right. So Barack Obama became president 2 months before he was born. What's your name? Adam. In Adam's life, our national debt has gone from $10 trillion to now over $18 trillion. In just over 5 years. That's larger than the size of our entire economy. Look, what we're doing is fundamentally irresponsible. It's immoral. If we keep doing this, our kids and grandkids, they'll spend their whole lives working not to meet the challenges of the future, not to meet their priorities, just working to pay off the debts of their deadbeat parents and grandparents. Our parents didn't do that to us. Their parents didn't do that to them. No generation in American history has ever done what we're doing right now. And yet, what I want to tell you all more than anything else is a word of encouragement. The challenges are great, yes. We're facing vast fiscal and economic challenges. We're trapped in the great stagnation. 92 million Americans aren't working. Obamacare is a train wreck. We're seeing our constitutional rights under assault from Washington each and every day. The Obama-Clinton foreign policy is a disaster. Now, last week, the president helpfully told us he has no strategy. That comment surprised precisely 0.0 people on the planet. You know, back in the 1980s, they asked Ronald Reagan, what's your strategy on the Cold War? He said, it's very simple. We win, they lose. It's almost as if Barack Obama read that and got it backwards. But let me tell you something. Despite the challenges, or actually, ironically, because of the challenges, I am profoundly optimistic. I'm going to tell you why. The book of Ecclesiastes tells us there's nothing new under the sun. I think where we are today is very, very much like the late 1970s. With Jimmy Carter in the White House, the similarities between Carter and Obama are uncanny. By the way, the one person in America thrilled with the job Barack Obama's doing is Jimmy Carter. But the same failed economic policies, the same feckless foreign policy, and we saw a grassroots movement sweep the country that became the Reagan Revolution. And it didn't come from Washington. Washington despised Ronald Reagan. It came from the American people. It came from the men and women in this room gathered here today. Millions of men and women who've been living their lives, going to work, going to church, raising their kids, who looked up and said, what on earth is happening? It isn't complicated to look at where we are today and to recognize it didn't work. This isn't a matter of right or left. It's not a matter of Democrat or Republican. It's a matter of common sense. It isn't working. And the reason I'm optimistic is because of each of you. The reason I'm optimistic is because the American people are waking up and standing up. And it took Jimmy Carter to give us Ronald Reagan.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
And I am convinced the most long-lasting legacy of Barack Obama is going to be a new generation of leaders in the Republican Party standing up and fighting for liberty. We are 58 days out from election day. 58 days. In November of 2014, I am convinced Republicans are going to retake the U.S. Senate and we're going to retire Harry Reid. There are a whole bunch of Democratic senators who we need to reintroduce to the private sector. And they can lose their Obamacare exemptions. And let me tell you something. New Hampshire is ground zero in that business. We're going to win this Senate race here in the state of New Hampshire. The men and women in this room are going to win the Senate race here in the state of New Hampshire. And when we win the Senate race in New Hampshire, the direct consequence of that is going to be that Harry Reid is going to pack up his office and move. We're here today because of a very exciting man.
Woo!
Yes.
We're here today because Custer is headed for Little Big One. You know, if you listen to the Democrats, if you listen to the mainstream media, although I repeat myself, they try very, very hard to tell you that Republicans are all a bunch of old, rich, fat, white guys. Let me say something. Y'all have a candidate here who makes their head explode. The men and women here are here today because we understand that freedom works. The men and women who are here today because we understand that the free enterprise system in the United States of America has been the greatest engine for prosperity and opportunity the world has ever seen. 57 years ago, my dad fled Cuba with nothing.
Woo!
He had $100 sewn into his underwear. He'd been in prison, he'd been tortured, and he came to America washing dishes, making 50 cents an hour. Now, my whole life, my dad's been my hero. But you know what I find most incredible about his story? How commonplace it is. Every single one of us here has a story just like that. We could literally walk up one after the other, whether it's us or our parents or our great-great-great-great-grandparents. What ties Americans together is we are the children of those who risk everything for freedom. And that is the fundamental DNA of what it means to be an American, is to value freedom and opportunity above all else. You want to know the fundamental DNA of an American? Live free, right? This election in November 2014 is about a choice. It's a fundamental choice between a path that isn't working and getting back to the principles that built this country. I think 4 issues will dominate this election. Number 1, no amnesty. President Obama has decided apparently his most pressing policy matter is to try to illegally grant amnesty to millions of people who came to this country illegally. Now, just today, he helpfully announced he still intends to grant amnesty to millions of people. But he kind of noticed the American people don't like that. So he very helpfully said he's going to wait until after the election to do it. Think a second about the cynicism that comment reveals. Think about what it says that Barack Obama and Harry Reid and the Washington Democrats, what they think about the American people. They don't care about what the people of New Hampshire want. They intend to force their radical agenda on the American people regardless. And they think, well, gosh, if it happens after the election, people will forget it. This election's a choice. If you support amnesty, vote for the Democrats. If you oppose amnesty and support rule of law, vote for Marilinda Garcia. The second issue this election is Obamacare. Take Obamacare. Please, take Obamacare. Obamacare is the most disastrous social legislation of modern times. It is a train wreck. Obamacare is the biggest job killer in this country. Millions of Americans have lost their jobs, have been forced into part-time work, have lost their health insurance, have lost their doctors, have seen their premiums skyrocket. You know, 5.5 years ago, reasonable minds perhaps could have differed over whether Obamacare might have worked. Today, seeing the disaster, seeing the suffering, seeing what's happening in New Hampshire. How many people in New Hampshire now have to drive an hour and a half, 2 hours to get to a doctor, to get to a hospital? Today, seeing the disaster, it is the essence of life. It is the essence of moderation. To recognize this thing isn't working, we need to repeal it and start it.
Yeah.
So the choice is real simple. If you support Obamacare taking away millions of jobs and millions of people health care and doctors, vote for the Democrats. If you want to repeal Obamacare, vote for Marilinda Garcia. The third issue this election is about is about restoring American leadership in the world. We have seen America recede from leadership in the world. Barack Obama has been, quote, leading from behind, which on its face is an oxymoron. You know, it reminds me of the word leading, one of my favorite movies, Princess Bride. You keep on using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. We have been abandoning our friends and allies. The nation of Israel, we should stand unshakably alongside Israel. When it comes to ISIS, ISIS is the face of evil. These guys are so extreme, they were thrown out of Al-Qaeda. That ain't easy to do. Right now, today, ISIS, they are crucifying Christians. They are beheading children. They are taking journalists, including a journalist from the state of New Hampshire, and beheading them on the global stage. And they are promising to take jihad to America and to murder innocent Americans. There are reported to be over 100 Americans right now fighting with ISIS. Tomorrow in the United States Senate, I will introduce legislation providing that any American who takes up arms and fights with ISIS forfeits his or her U.S. citizenship. Allies themselves with radical Islamic terrorists who have declared war on America, who are murdering American civilians, and are acquiring the means and have the stated intention to come here and murder more, should not be able to use a U.S. passport to come freely back to America to commit those crimes. So again, a fundamental choice. If you support the Obama-Clinton policy of withdrawing from the world, of leading from behind, of having no strategy, of abandoning our friends and allies, of projecting weakness and appeasement, and failing to defend U.S. national security interests, then vote Democrat. If you want to restore American leadership in the world, vote Marilinda. Fourth and final issue this election comes down to is defending our constitutional rights. We have never seen an administration like the Obama administration launch an assault on our constitutional rights. It's like they're going down systematically the Bill of Rights, trying to violate each one at a time. The First Amendment. We have the IRS asking citizen groups, tell us what books you're reading. Tell us the content of your prayers. You know what? The federal government has no business asking any Americans the content of their prayers. You have the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms. Vice President Joe Biden. You know the nice thing around that? You don't need a punchline. I promise you it works. The next time you go to a party, just walk up to someone, Say Vice President Joe Biden. Close your mouth. They will crack up laughing. 100%. But Vice President Joe Biden said, if anyone attacks your house, just go outside with a double-barreled shotgun and fire both barrels in the air. Now that is very, very good advice. If it so happens you're being attacked by a flock of geese. You have the Fourth and Fifth Amendments, our right to privacy. How many of y'all have your cell phones with you? Let me ask you, please leave your cell phones on. I want to make sure President Obama hears every word we hear say. They have the 10th Amendment, or as President Obama calls it, the what? The fundamental protection that says the powers not given to the federal government are reserved to the states.
Yes.
That's right.
That means that the powers of the federal government are few and defined. It should do certain functions like protect our national security and secure the border.
Right. But there are whole other areas of policy where the federal government has no business, and I'll tell you one place to start. We should repeal every word of Common Core. Education is too important to have it governed by unelected bureaucrats in Washington.
That's right.
It should be at the state level, or even better, at the local level, where we have direct control over the education of our kids.
Yes.
So this election is a basic choice. If you support the federal government's abuse of power, its assault on our First Amendment, on our freedom of speech, on our religious liberty, if you support the federal government's assault on our right to keep and bear arms, if you support the federal government violating our right to privacy and seizing our private cell phone conversations, if you support the federal government dictating curriculums in our schools, then vote Democrat. But if you support the Bill of Rights and the Constitution and the liberty that God gave every single American, then vote for Marilinda. I want to close by doing two things. Number one, making a specific ask of each and every one. There are two elections coming up. A primary on Tuesday, and then a general election in 58 days. When Marilinda wins the primary. Because of the men and women in this room, you'll know I said when. She's going to need you in the general to retake this congressional seat for New Hampshire. But my ask is simple. On Tuesday, and then 58 days from now, I want to ask each and every man and woman in this room, vote for Marilinda 10 times. Now look, you may think I'm coming from South Texas. We're not talking voter fraud. We're not Democrats. But let me tell you how every person here can vote for her 10 times. Each and every one of you, come out and vote on Tuesday. And between now and then, talk to 9 other people who wouldn't vote otherwise. Pick up the phone and call your brother. Call your mom. Call your business partner. Call your next door neighbor and say, listen,
Are you worried about the direction of this country? Are you worried about the future of your kids, of your grandkids? Then do something about it. Listen, every one of us is tired of the TV ads that go back and forth, and it's easy to want to just block it out all out of your mind. There is nothing in politics more powerful than the men and women gathered in this room. There is nothing more powerful than when each and every one of you goes to someone who knows and loves and respects you, and you say one-on-one, looking them in the eyes, I'm asking you, please, show up on Tuesday and vote for Marilinda.
Right.
This matters for my kids. If every person in this room does that, if every person in this room gets 9 other people, they're going to call the election on Tuesday. That is the power of what y'all can do. That is the power of the grassroots. And once you've done it on Tuesday, it's going to make it a heck of a lot easier to do it and do it again in November.
Yeah.
And that, very simply, is how we turn this country around. I said I was optimistic because of the grassroots, because the American people are waking up. I'm optimistic because of each of you. Because I know you're here because you love this country. Because you love our Constitution and our freedoms, and you see that our nation is in peril. Now is the time when we are called to stand and fight. Now is the time when our character is put to the test. And I'll tell you, I am privileged. I am honored to be here to encourage each of you, to thank each of you, to cheer you on. And the second final thing I want to do is I want to introduce you to the star of the hour, to the next Congresswoman from the state of New Hampshire.
I've been in this race now since basically about 9 months, from January when I announced, and it's been quite a road. And at the risk of getting emotional, I want to thank a few people. For example, Dave here in the front, who immediately, I think he was one of the 3rd phone calls I made, and he said, I'll be your treasurer. Sure, I've done it before for other candidates. And he's made sure that the Democrats have nothing to pick on when it comes to my financial reports, and that's really important. I've also had Raul in the back there, who not only shares Senator Cruz's family experience of being refugees from Cuba, but he also hosted one of my most unique and interesting meet and greets way back in the winter at the cigar lounge down the street. Then there's Steve Gadu, who I've represented for 4 terms in Salem as a state rep, but we had never actually connected. But we got to talking about issues and why I'm running, and he's been so supportive that there he is. That he actually has a massive sign attached to the back of his truck that he drives everywhere around town. So I know that shows great dedication. I appreciate that. Then there are those that I see that I've served with in the legislature for the last 8 years or so. And with them, we fought to uphold the Constitution. We fought to reduce the size and scope of government. We fought to be good stewards of the taxpayer resources, which is a really important role as a public governing official. And always to keep your tax dollars low and to be sure that you as American citizens and New Hampshire citizens are empowered to make decisions at the most local level. That's you as individuals, as families, as communities, and as a state. And that has to do with health care, that has to do with education, that has to do with, again, how you allocate your resources that you work so hard for. And so I see my colleagues Don and Ralph here in the front, and Senator Luther, we all worked really hard. And then there's family, my dad and my sister and my mom. Who have been so supportive of my uncle, who I got one of the honors, the greatest honors during my time in the legislature was to give a speech as the Army National Guard deployed to Iraq to serve for a year, and my uncle was part of that group. Helicopters, he returned. So we're, one of the things I spoke to at that point, and one of the reasons that I decided to run for Congress is there are, everybody here, we're all invested in being the best we can be and, living fulfilling lives and fulfilling that American dream, not only for ourselves, but also for our children and our grandkids. And when I see what's happening in our Congress these days and come to understand that Representative Custer, who is considered the most liberal member of Congress, and this is a congresswoman who as recently as a few months ago, now bearing in mind, what are some of the hallmarks of the Obama administration? You have the IRS scandal. That's an agency that can turn your life upside down in a flash. No accountability, cover-ups. You see what happened in the aftermath of Benghazi. It's one thing to make a mistake and not have the proper security in place. It's another thing to lie to the American people and shamefully imprison someone based on false claims. Then you have the VA. These are, our veterans of all people. We should be ensured that they have health care that they need when they need it. Again, lack of accountability, lack of transparency, lies, cover-ups. Then you have something as basic as health care. It's huge. It's 1/6 of our economy. It's also one of the most private, personal things that we have. And it's one thing to debate about policy. We've had that debate in our state. I can say, look, I'm fighting to move us towards a more innovative, consumer-oriented model, and then be arguing with people and debating who want to move it to a socialized, centralized government system. That's one thing. But when you, as a president, and all of your surrogates, foist something upon the American people based, again, on false premises, on lies, that is unacceptable. And Ann Custer still claims to be one of the strongest supporters of the president in all of U.S. Congress. That is from her own mouth a few months ago on New Hampshire Public Radio. And she also says that despite the fact that we have 26 hospitals in this state, 10 of which are out of network, 7 of those in her own district, though she's serving her first term and wasn't there to vote for it, she said, yes, had I been there, I definitely would have supported it. So this is who I'm seeking to replace this coming November. And I know, many of you that have been with me through this campaign remember when I adopted my motto, and that's opportunity for all. And the reason I chose that is that the other thing, and one of the most pernicious threats, I think, to our society right now is the way, again, the president and all his surrogates, including Ann Custer, they're always, bringing up these inequalities in our society, both perceived and real. And then what they do is they separate us, by race, by gender, by demographic, by socioeconomic status. They divide us. They pit us against each other. They say that our problems are too large and too looming to be solved by us Americans. And so their answer is always the government. They say, we're going to handle it. We're going to equalize. We're going to mandate this equality of opportunity. And I believe what has made America the exceptional country it is today is that we've offered to every American and every generation equality of opportunity. And that's what we need to preserve, and that's what I want to go to Washington to protect. So I really appreciate you being here. As you know, there are a few more days before the primary, so it is true. If you can get out there and knock on doors and make phone calls and tell your friends and email your groups and all of that out to support me, I so appreciate it. And then we just have to keep going through November. So Senator Cruz came all the way here from Texas to help out. I really appreciate it. And I know all of you heart, for all of these months. And I just ask you to give it a few days more. And again, just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. And on to victory. So
Friends, you've heard the message. Cruz couldn't be clearer, right? Money and bondage, lower prosperity, you know who to vote for, Custer. But we know history, don't we? Custer lost. Every one of you can't leave this room with just happy thoughts, all right? I believe, is there a phone bank that's being set up right here?
Yes.
All right, so we need people right now to follow up right now. Come on up, let's make some phone calls. And as Senator Cruz said, 9 people. Why stop at 9? I mean, social media. I got over 2,000 friends on Facebook, so let's go. So please, this is so critical. And here's the thing. If Marilinda comes out with a strong victory in the primary, you better believe that makes her even stronger going into the job. Right.
Yeah.
So friends, you know what you have to do. You got to do it. And just the old Nike thing, just do it. Thanks for coming.
We're going to be sitting here making phone calls. If you'd like to stay and help us get a quote from Marilinda, you're more than welcome. Thank you guys for coming. Seriously.